everyone, so in this video today, I want to share my experience shooting with Fomapan 400 over the last couple of weeks, talk about why it's my second favorite black and white film stock, and also why I think it's a great option to shoot with, especially if you're looking for something on a budget. So recently I've been working on a new course and also shooting some reviews of cameras that haven't been tested, so I wanted a cheap film stock just in case any of it was wasted on gear that didn't work. So it came down to Kentmere or Fomapan 400, and I ended up going with the latter at £3.75 a roll, and to my surprise, I actually ended up really enjoying the look of it. So Foma is based out of the Czech Republic. They've been making film for over 100 years. This says actually since 1921, so bang on 100 years. And their 400 speed film, which they also label as action, is available in 35, 120, and also 4x5 sheet film, which is pretty cool. Very affordable, like I mentioned. I think I paid £3.75 per roll of this, which is half the price of some of the other manufacturers, if not even a little more. And if I had to pick one black and white film stock to shoot with, it would be Kodak's TMAX 400. It's for sure my favorite, but this has quickly become my second favorite. It's a very different looking film than TMAX, but that's kind of what I like about it, to have a different option. So I want to talk about some of those unique traits today. We're going to start by looking at some 35mm, jump to 120, and then jump to some specific examples of the things that stand out with this film stock. So up first is 35mm, and I actually shot a roll of 120 for my first experience with this film, and as you'll see in a bit, definitely has a bit of a different feel to it, but I wanted to start with 35mm as that's where I'd most likely use this film moving forward. So we're just gonna go through these images kind of quickly to give you a feel for how this film looks, and then I will dive into the specifics of what I love so much about it. But this was the first image that I shot on 35mm, and right away when I saw this result, I was intrigued. It just has this like classic vintage look to it that I really enjoy. Obviously, the final look, the contrast and the tones, this comes down to how it's been edited. Probably it looks similar to some of my other stuff shot on TMAX, but there are some standout features with this film. A little bit of a background though, this was developed here at home with Ilford DDX 1+4, and then it was scanned on the Coolscan 9000 and converted using Negative Lab Pro. But the first thing you'll notice on the 35mm examples when you zoom in is just the grain. So it has this very kind of classic feel to the grain. It's quite fine as well, but there is a lot of it. It's like the opposite of TMAX. And again, I love the contrast between the two of these film stocks. Really gives me two different options to work with. There's also this little flare here from the lens, but this film also renders highlights in a really unique way, which I'll talk about after. This one though, this is a good example. I don't like this image too much, but if you go in to 100%, you can see its ability to still produce, sharp negatives. There's a ton of detail. The 120 results actually caught me off guard. I scanned those first. I was impressed with the detail, but as a 35mm film as well, a smaller negative, certainly capable of rendering details in a scene and producing nice sharp images afterwards. This one I enjoy as well. This was obviously shot a little bit later in the evening into the sun, and it's almost like there were these few scenes that I photographed with the Foma 400 where it was like certain things came together and the end result was this very kind of classic feel. So again, the grain up here, you can see where the lens vignetted, super heavy, which I like. It's not, for me, it's not distracting. Again, this is all going to be personal preference, but it's like grainy yet still sharp. So I like the combination of the two. But I love the feel of the scene right here. Let's see, a couple more. This one as well, you can see, you have the bright sun on the side of the house here. Love the look of that. A little bit of this glow. Overall way it kind of renders tones. Super nice. Love the 35mm version of this film. So you're getting an idea for it. This is obviously a very contrasty scene, backlit, going for the highlights. Love the look of those. And then one more here. Quickly as well, this film is still very flexible. I shot this all at ISO 200, which a lot of people said, Foma 400 actually is, you should expose it as like a 320 or a 200. So I exposed it at 200. I was happy with how much information there was. There's still a lot of flexibility to edit these to look however you want. I went with a little more of like a contrasty look, but they still do leave room for kind of messing around. Okay, so up next we'll take a look at some of the 120 samples, and these were all shot on the Pentax 672 with the 75mm lens, and this was actually the first roll of Foma that I developed. Like I said before, it has a different feel than the 35mm, mostly because of the grain. So obviously the 120 version is the same film, it still has that look to it, but obviously this being shot on the Pentax 6.7, the negative is massive compared to the 35mm version, and for me it almost loses a little bit of like the like roughness and the character that the versions have, that the images have shot on 35mm. But this image, so this is a 10,000 pixel wide file, so this is massive. And this was the first one I ever scanned, and when I looked at it at 100%, you'll see the detail is pretty crazy in this image. Especially like some of these fine details back here, the way it can, pick up all the lettering on the car and stuff like that. Definitely caught me off guard. And I would say, if you're looking for like a budget medium format 120 film that can still perform, this is, in my opinion, got to be one of the best. It still has that grain, you can see a lot of it in this windshield. Very different than, again, say a TMAX. Not comparing the two, obviously they're very different film stocks, but the grain is what I love about it. But this is at 100%, with the medium format examples, as you zoom out and look at the image a little smaller, the grain isn't as apparent as the 35mm versions. And actually, that's what makes me maybe not enjoy this as much for medium format. And again, just with this image, I mean, we could take this as an example. There's still a lot of room to adjust tones. Obviously, I'm just jacking the shadow slider here, but just to give you an idea, I shot some of the Rolly films before, and they had this like look baked in where it was like you were kind of locked into how the shadows looked on those films. Where the Foma, it's still like it gives you, for me, it's like the perfect mix of like having a look, but still allowing you to edit the film to your liking and make it look how you want. So this one is as well, if we zoom in, I know you get the idea with the detail on this film, but I was impressed with the medium format versions of it. This is at 100%. You can see these fine details in here, the lettering on the boat in the back. It's a great option certainly as a cheap medium format film, but even just as an all-around film to work with. So yeah, medium format version, still very nice. I feel like it loses a little bit of that roughness and that character that the 35mm version had. But obviously that's kind of to be expected a little bit as you jump up in size. So love the look of this, but I want to talk about some of the specific things that have sold me on this film. So I don't know how much of it I'll shoot in 120. Probably not that much, just because the TMAX is kind of my go-to, but I feel like it gives me this option in 35 that I'd be a lot more likely to use over TMAX, just for the type of work that I'm making. It's almost like shooting 120 with the TMAX gives me these, amazing tones, these very clean files, whereas this paired with maybe like an older 35mm camera gives me this creative tool to make images that have like a classic feel, a little more rough, a little more character to them. But the first thing I want to show is just the way that this film deals with highlights. So apparently the anti-halation layer on the Foma is a little weaker than, say, some of the Kodak or Ilford film stocks, and that's why you see wherever you have these areas of extreme highlights, you kind of see this like blooming, which I enjoy. It almost looks like a little bit of like a pro mist filter effect. Little different, but same idea, just where these highlights bloom a little bit. And to me, that adds to that vintage feel a bit. And it's one of the things that I enjoy about this. Same here on this house. That's bright evening sun hitting the side of this house. Just a little bit of this blooming here. Love how that looks. Let's see if we have another example here. So this one as well. This is actually quite heavy. It's almost like formed this ring around where this specular highlight was on this car. Just like this subtle thing though that adds to the look of this film. Same with this one. So it's almost like wherever you have these specular highlights, you have these little rings or these little blooming spots. To some people that might be a negative. To me, it adds to the look of this film and is one of the things that I love about it. Obviously, you know, a lot of these 120 examples, the light was a little more overcast, but we do have this one that was bright sunlight. And the interesting thing is, you know, obviously these aren't kind of specular highlights, but we do have this bright sun on this white camper. And I don't see any of that happening. Same with, you know, the car here. These will be some specular highlights here. So it's, again, you know, as you step up in the negative size, you lose a little bit of these kind of creative traits that this film has. So that's the first one, just the way this film renders highlights. Love that about it. The second thing is the grain. So like we talked about in 35mm, that's one of the things I love about having different options with black and white films is you can choose something like the TMAX if you want these really smooth tones, clean images, not a lot of grain, or you can switch out to something like this and certainly is not lacking a look. Especially in this example here, you know, this one that was backlit, you can see here in kind of these shadow areas, a lot of grain, but it's not chunky. It's not distracting and chunky. It's just very fine. So that's the second one is the grain. And then the third thing is just the flexibility of this film. So again, I'm actually going to do an exposure test on this film just to see how it reacts. But like I mentioned, I shot a lot of the 35mm stuff on the Olympus XA, rated it at 200. And then obviously the Olympus is just an aperture priority camera. So all the metering was automatic. You know, I didn't have control over it, but all of the negatives were quite dense, you know, a lot of information, and they scanned great as well. So that's not to say that you could be lazy with this film stock, but just from my experience working with it in 35mm, it never held me back in terms of, you know, trying to recover detail in the shadows or having enough information to work with. So quite flexible as well, which for a budget film stock is a nice feature to have. So overall, this is a film that I really enjoyed using, and I'll probably be shooting quite a bit more of it moving forward. You know, it just gives me this second creative tool where, you know, I have 120 with TMAX for probably a lot of the current work I'm doing, and then Foma likely in 35 only with an older camera when I'm looking to make some images that have a little bit more character, a little bit more of like a classic, rough, vintage look to them. I don't really know how to describe it, but you know what I mean. Looking at those results earlier. But anyways, if you haven't shot this film, you're looking for a budget option or just a new one to try out, I'd highly recommend it. If you have, I'd love to hear your experience. I posted some images on my Instagram. I had mixed opinions for sure. A lot of people have shot this film, but that's how it goes with all this stuff. It's all about, you know, trying out different options, finding which ones work best for you, and then most importantly, just getting out there and making some work with them. So anyways, as always, just want to say thank you and hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you soon.